Do you know these antique Greek and Roman statues that look like this? Do you notice something about these pictures that they have in common? Anything you can think of apart from the material and the fact that they're naked? Why are they always naked, by the way? I'm sure they had clothes. Okay, I'm drifting away. If you said something along the lines of dynamic posing, you're right. They were made with a specific technique that we artists can steal to make our art more dynamic. Be it for traditional or digital art, as long as you draw humans in any form, this tip might be something for you. In this video, I'm going to show you how. As you noticed, this is a part 2. Check out the first video if you haven't already. Since a lot of you seem to like the first video and have gotten better at video editing, I decided to do a part 2 with 5 more tips to make your art more dynamic. I will rewind some stuff, so no worries, you will understand it even without watching the first part, but I definitely recommend watching both to get the most out of it. So let me ask you something and be honest. When you draw characters, do they tend to look very stiff? That was something I personally struggled with a lot when I was still starting out with art. I was getting better line control, I was learning about composition, I was learning all the anatomy, I was watching all the videos and tutorials, but at the end of the day, my art just didn't feel natural. It just didn't feel dynamic, it still felt stiff, it just didn't look right. Until I bought a book. Yes, a book. A lot of this knowledge that I'm going to share with you in this video comes from a how to draw book that I bought as a teen, and it explains one simple concept that was a total game changer for me. I felt like if I was Plankton and I finally stole the secret Krabby Patty formula from the Krusty Krab. It was something so simple, easy to do, and just in plain sight, and now I'm implementing it all the time. Since it helped me so much, I want to share it with you. What I'm talking about is the so-called contrapposto. Nope, I don't mean trap music. This is not about the pros and cons of pasta. It's the contrapposto. Still don't know why I'm throwing Italian words at you. Let me show you something. I'm going to draw someone standing, someone sitting, and someone walking, but without implementing the contrapposto. This is how I used to draw poses when I started out. Can you already guess what the contrapposto is? So basically, what is missing here? If not, no worries, it will become clearer in a second. Because now I'm drawing the same 3 poses with the contrapposto in mind. What am I doing differently? I know these are just some quick doodles, so they're not super pretty, but already this early in the drawing process is where the contrapposto can help you a lot to make your drawings look less stiff or more dynamic, if you will. Comment down below if you could already guess what the difference is. Pay close attention to the horizontal red lines here in the first sketches. They're all super parallel, and that can get very boring. Now, there are only 2 out of those lines that you need to remember in the future to be more specific, their relation to each other. No, I don't mean whether these lines are friends or in a relationship. I mean, one simple tip, don't draw them in parallel. What you will notice in the new drawings is that when the shoulder line is rotated into one direction, the hip line will be turned into the other direction. And that's already it. Congrats, you have now learned the contrapposto. What is happening is that the body weight is being shifted more onto one leg opposed to the other, and this leads to your whole body naturally following an S-line, because the ribs and hips move into opposite directions to balance this out. You can try it right now if you want. Stand up and shift your body weight onto one leg, you will notice your ribs and shoulders adjusting, even if just slightly. When shifting the body weight, we want to make sure that the person doesn't look like they are falling though. Look at these 2 pictures. Do you notice why the left one looks wrong and more unnatural than the right one? That's because the human body has a center of gravity that you need to pay attention to. This becomes especially important when we are shifting the body weight with the contrapposto. Check out the first video to learn more about that. Now, I want to show you some practical examples of how I implemented the contrapposto in my art, and how I still do. In some instances, you will see that the shoulder and hip lines are at harsher angles to each other, and in other examples, they are not far from parallel. Depending on your desired outcome, choose how extreme you want to go with the contrapposto. I also like to play with the eye line, as you can see, and I like taking the knee line into account sometimes when it comes to visualizing the S-line of the whole body. As you can see, the eye line isn't always in an opposite direction as the shoulder line, which is no problem because I didn't want it too extreme in that case, but it's still dynamic, since we have the contrapposto with the ribs and hips. As I already said, these 2 lines are the most important ones to pay attention to. The first tip I want to talk about is relaxation versus tension. For the sake of completeness, I'm showing you some examples that aren't directly the contrapposto per definition, because the ribcage and hips are not in opposite directions. I just wanted to show you that just by having these 2 lines not in parallel, you can already spice up the pose and loosen it up a little. You don't have to use the contrapposto, and not using the contrapposto is certainly not wrong. There might even be cases where you find it too extreme, or it's just not the look you're going for. There are ways to make it dynamic without the contrapposto, of course. For example, by simply avoiding horizontal lines, with another tip from my first video, or whatever else you have in store. There are even cases where we don't want it dynamic, right? For example, this painting. Sure, I could have implemented the contrapposto to have him sit more naturally, but the stiff vibe was actually what I was going for. That's the vibe I wanted. I wanted it tense. I wanted him to be tense. Generally speaking, standing very straight with equally distributed body weight and parallel shoulder and hip lines tends to not only look stiff, but also tense. Once you break the static line, for example with the contrapposto, you can make the pose look more relaxed. But plot twist, the contrapposto can look both relaxed or tense. The contrapposto can even look super exaggerated, but it doesn't have to. As you can see in this example, your characters can look both relaxed or with engagement in their pose. It also depends a bit on the pose you chose and how harsh the angles of the body lines are. It really boils down to whether it's a natural pose the body falls into when relaxing, or if you're actively pushing the shoulders and hips, or even the headline to highlight the contrapposto. It's actually pretty versatile. If you want to go for a super exaggerated, dynamic pose though, just make sure to keep the maximum flexibility of the body in mind. We don't want our characters breaking their bones for our poses. For example, the human head can only be laid on the side around 45 degrees from the spine. With a flexed elbow, you can only raise your arm to a vertical line. Stuff like that. Now let's talk perspective. Let's say we have a one-point perspective. You might be inclined to draw the shoulder and hip lines along the perspective lines. But if the person stands in contrapposto, the shoulder and hip lines will not follow these lines exactly. It helps to draw the perspective grid to consider the shoulder and hip angles correctly. Next up, the difference of sitting and standing. When we apply the contrapposto to a standing pose, the leg with more body weight pushes the hip upwards, and there is more wiggle room on what to do with the other leg. This changes a bit with the sitting pose. If you shift the weight to one hip, it's the opposite. Not the side with the weight goes up, but the other one. You can imagine it like a rocker on the playground that goes down where you sit on it. But in the end, the principle of the contrapposto is the same here. Hip and shoulder lines go into opposite directions. So usually the arm on the side of the body weight will also support from the side so that the person doesn't fall on the side. By the way, if you cross the legs, your hips automatically tilt, and when the person is sitting on the ground, you get even more possibilities on what to do with the legs. A term that I mentioned a lot now is the S-line. You saw me draw in this S-line a few times now. Even if not directly through the contrapposto, an S-line in the pose will help you make it look more dynamic. I told you to mainly focus on the hips and shoulders so far in the video, but don't underestimate the I-line. A simple head tilt can do wonders to enhance the S-line. Don't forget that in many cases when using the contrapposto you will get a hip up and bust up effect. Even though we are simplifying it with the shoulder and hip line, the rib cage and hips are three-dimensional structures that will be affected. And the devil is in the details, and in this case the devil is the S-line. What I'm trying to say, you can use little things like stretched fingertips and toes to elongate a pose, create more tension and naturally enhance the S-line. That's also a good way to make a pose more graceful. If you want to be extra graceful, maybe try broad movements on top of that. You can also elongate the neck by having the front-facing shoulder lower and the head tilted into the opposite direction. I don't know why, but the book where I learned this from is framing the S-line as something that is supposed to accentuate femininity, and they mainly showed example drawings of women. For me, both have always been features that I would apply for whatever gender. There's a reason why those Roman statues were not only female representing. There's also some other stuff in the book that I don't really like that much. That's just my own grain of salt. In case you know the original, I'm not especially recommending that book. Anyways, I just wanted to clarify that, and I'm sharing the selected tips that helped me, and I'm sharing my own experience. All these poses so far were rather static poses, but we made them more dynamic with the S-line and the contrapposto. When talking about dynamic poses though, we can't leave out action poses. I'm talking about actual movement, like sports. I generally recommend using references to make the poses realistic. It can get tricky to get the center of gravity right when drawing poses in active movement. Let's say you're running around a curve. The centrifugal force applies, for example. In my first video, I explained to watch out that the center of gravity lies between the feet. Then you're usually fine. But action poses don't really care about that rule. That topic might need a whole video on its own, actually, but the easiest way is to look up references. Maybe ask yourself, where in these pictures do you think the center of gravity would be? Nobody could actually stand in these poses. As a snapshot alone, they seem unstable and imbalanced, and the person would fall down. But we recognize that this pose is part of a motion, so in this case, instability makes it dynamic. Alright guys, today we dived a bit deeper into the contrapposto. You now know what the contrapposto is, how to use it, and what its purpose is. You can make something look both relaxed or tense with the contrapposto. Don't forget forget to consider the hip and shoulder angles in perspective and the differences of the contrapposto when sitting and standing. In any case, keep the S-line in mind and how even details like the eye line, fingertips and toes can contribute to it. You don't even need the contrapposto to achieve an S-line or a dynamic pose. Don't forget to pay attention to the center of gravity, especially when it comes to action poses. And with that, those were 5 more tips on how to make your art more dynamic. Let me know in the comments how you liked the video and if you have any further questions. Don't forget to check out the first video if you haven't already. If you want a free shoutout, a fun art roast, or genuine tips on how to improve, use the link in the description to submit your art. If you enjoyed the video, leave a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I appreciate it a lot. Thanks for watching and see ya! Bye!